Robin Lyonga can't believe what he has just been told.
This is terrible. What am I going to tell Dan?
His family's livelihood depends on cattle, but disease has closed the abattoir, and now he cannot sell his animals for the money he desperately needs. Disease control measures mean Robin must work within a difficult system. If he wants to sell his cattle to the export-accredited abattoir in town, he must meet demanding standards. For Robin, that means first getting a permit to move his cattle, then a 4-day walk, herding his cattle to the nearest quarantine camp. Then, he has to look after his animals inside the camp for 3 weeks. Only after 21 days in the quarantine camp and a certificate from veterinary services that his cattle are free from foot and mouth disease will the abattoir accept his cattle. This would not trouble Robin if it weren't for the fact that the system also insists that his cattle come from an area that is free of foot and mouth disease. But the 4-day trek and 3-week wait is just a fraction of the effort that Robin has put into trying to lift his family and his community out of poverty. Here's how it happened. Robin's village lies within the Caprivi region of northern Namibia. Here, green floodplains are grazed by large herds of game, and the scenic rivers and wetlands harbor an incredible array of water-dependent species and birds. But beyond the rivers, the land is semi-arid. The climate is harsh and the rains unpredictable. Thousands of people live in small villages within the area, and they barely survive by farming this barren land. The people depend on fish and wild plants for food. Their own cattle are too valuable to eat. Because of poverty, it is tempting for locals to take advantage of the wildlife. In the 70s and 80s, poaching was so prevalent that many species were hunted almost to extinction. The Namibian government responded to this crisis. They motivate rural communities to get involved in nature conservation, to form conservancies, and to earn money from sustainable use of their wildlife and natural environment. 5 years ago, Robin Lyonga joined the Mashi Conservancy. For many days, he walked from one village to the other, convincing people in his community to join the conservancy and commit to a new way of life with wildlife conservation as a priority. The then young Mashi Conservancy started progressing through the efforts of Robin and others like him. Protecting the environment ensures a long-term future for his children, Robin knows. But he also learned, wildlife businesses will not fully support everyone. Farming, and especially cattle farming, is equally vital. Almost all the families have cattle. It is in their culture, a way of life. Robin's brother Dan works as a cleaner at a lodge in the area. He wants to become a guide, showing tourists the wildlife in the area. But to do this, he must be qualified.
The course is very expensive. I'll have to stop working while doing my studies.
Robin, deeply touched by his brother's dream, decided to call a family meeting.
If we slaughter and sell cattle as meat, we will get 1,200 Namibian dollars per ox. If we sell them live to local traders, we could get 1,500 Namibian dollars. But if we take them to the quarantine camp, we might be able to get 3,500 Namibian dollars per ox.
Robin goes back to his brother Dan with the news that his family has agreed to sell some of their cattle to pay for the conservation course he needs to do. Two national parks, now teeming with wildlife, surround Robin's village. There are no fences to separate the reserves from the villages. Robin's house lies on this invisible boundary. Every day, when he and his family take their cattle to graze, they have to respect the boundary line. The rule is simple. The grass on one side is for the cattle, on the other, it's for the wild animals. But during the dry season, competition increases and it becomes very difficult to convince farmers that the wild animals need more grass than the cattle. Cattle are wealth for farmers like Robin. They represent a bank account, a retirement policy, and education for the children. So it's a process in the new Mashi Conservancy, convincing farmers of the long-term advantages of caring for the wildlife. 15 game guards have been chosen from the community to protect the wildlife.
I've got 2 spots. This is a zebra spot.
People have agreed to stop poaching. The guards are given the authority to confiscate snares and prosecute offenders. The Mashi Conservancy is part of a large-scale master plan. 5 countries connected by the Zambezi and Okavango river systems will create one of the largest conservation areas in the world. The Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, or KAZA as it has become known, is blessed with extraordinary numbers and diversity of wildlife and includes major wetlands such as the Okavango Delta. It is a sanctuary to about 230,000 elephants, the largest population in the world. Tourists from all over the world come to this region to experience the vast, unspoilt wilderness and spectacular wildlife. The government assists the Conservancy by releasing more game into the area. Luxury game lodges are licensed to operate in Mashi. In exchange, they pay a percentage of their revenues to the Conservancy. Campsites are set up for more adventurous tourists. All this activity creates employment, but not enough. So for Robin, there is a difficulty. Who should get a job and who not?
The money is definitely not enough. How can management receive money but the rest of the community so little? If the management can't raise enough funds, then we should appoint new people.
At the first annual meetings, members make it clear that they experience very little benefit from the Conservancy. But there is some progress. The community decides to pool income and buy a vehicle. Robin becomes the proud driver of a new pickup. Soon, sick people are being taken to the clinic and the old are transported where they need to go. For the women making crafts, the vehicle has become a lifeline. They can now display their wares in a kiosk on the main road where many tourists visit and spend money. life slowly starts to change in Mashi. Game numbers are on the increase. Wildlife corridors are created throughout the conservancy, and no one can plant crops or live in areas designated for wildlife. But without fences, wild animals have started to come into the villages. In a single night, an elephant can destroy months of back-breaking work and a year's supply of food.
On Monday night, there were 19. Tuesday night, there were 17. I don't have any gun. I could have a gun, I could not to chase, I could kill. I could have a rifle, I could shoot one.
Families literally live in their maize fields for months because of the elephants. The game guards in Mashi have to protect community members and their crops. But here, no one carries a gun. Elephant dung is collected and mixed with chili powder.
We just put the oil. This we use the oil when making chili bomb. You put some dungs, then just put.
The smell is enough to scare off any elephant, no matter how big or fearless.
Just a bit. Or direction to other you mona no fence. I'm with the piano and dinner play up on so. I'm not going to go.
The free movement of animals also means that the cattle and buffalo can graze together and drink at the same waterholes and rivers. Unfortunately, healthy buffalo can transmit foot and mouth disease viruses to cattle. Buffalo herds maintain these viruses continuously. The viruses have no effect on the buffalo, but cause the much feared disease when cattle are infected. In reality, foot and mouth disease is a mild disease that rarely kills livestock and does not infect people. But because of present international trade rules, the presence of foot and mouth disease in an area disqualifies that area from exporting its animals and animal products. With wildlife numbers increasing, the government grants the Mashi Conservancy their first hunting quota. A limited number of game animals are offered to international hunters who are only too happy to pay handsomely for the experience and their trophies. The meat is distributed among the Mashi members. At the next annual general meeting, tangible evidence of the Conservancy starting to deliver benefits is clear. But Robin knows it is not yet enough to truly change their lives. Because they are in a high-risk foot and mouth disease area, Robin and the cattle owners must drive their cattle twice a year to nearby pens and crushes to be vaccinated against foot and mouth disease.
Our neighbor's cattle are looking so good. I heard they started doing grazing management.
We rotate the cattle grazing areas every 3 months. We herd the cattle rather than allowing them to graze randomly.
It's here at the crushes that Robin learned that the export abattoir in town pays far more for their cattle than they previously received by selling to local meat markets. Robin realizes that this could also be a turning point for them. he calls for more meetings. This plan, like all the others, needs everyone's cooperation.
It is a good plan, because if we rest the grass on this side for a few months, we'll be good in winter. If we can get higher prices for our cattle, then we should definitely work together.
But the news at the quarantine camp is shocking. A single cow 150 kilometers away has foot and mouth disease. The abattoir will no longer buy cattle from anywhere in the region. In fact, it will close for several months. Even though Robin's cattle have been vaccinated and are healthy, they may not be moved, and all livestock activity is brought to a sudden halt for months. They will have to stay for months in the quarantine camp.
But why are we, here in the quarantine camp, punished for a sick cow many miles from here?
That is what the international regulations say must happen, and Namibia's veterinary services make sure the rules are respected. Conservationists urge Robin and his community to limit the use of fences, to allow wild animal populations to connect, and where possible, to re-establish historical wildlife migration routes. But sanitary regulations of high-value beef markets around the world send Robin and millions of other African farmers the message that they cannot trade their beef if they live in areas that are not recognized as free from foot and mouth disease. To do that, they will have to get rid of all the buffalo, a species essential to ecological health and ecotourism, or build fences to keep the buffalo out. To be able to trade, we put up fences in an effort to create artificial geographical zones that are free from foot and mouth disease by excluding potentially infected wild animals. The result is devastating. Natural migration routes for animals to reach alternative water sources and grazing are blocked. Biodiversity is lost, and our wildlife numbers are dwindling. Fourteen trans-frontier conservation areas have been or are being established in southern Africa. The Trans-Frontier Conservation Areas movement is an effort to conserve some of the world's most valuable remaining wilderness and wildlife areas. These will cover more than 1.2 million square kilometers of countryside. The objective is to remove some of the fences in order to re-establish natural wildlife movements across international boundaries. How can we say that Robin's beef will spread disease? His cattle have been vaccinated against foot and mouth and stood in quarantine for 3 weeks. His cattle will pass the health inspections before and after slaughter. The beef will further be deboned, lymph nodes removed, and the beef matured before chilling. The possibility of foot and mouth disease viruses surviving this type of processing has been scientifically shown to be minimal. It is actually irrelevant whether Robin's cattle come from an area where there are buffalo. It's irrelevant whether the area is considered free from foot and mouth disease or not. Commodity-based trade, where the focus is on the safety of the product rather than the official status of the location where the animals live, gives Robin's community a way to conserve wildlife and farm livestock profitably in the same place at the same time. Such a change in regulations would allow Southern Africa to move away from the present system, where huge tracts of land are designated for either conservation or livestock production. Imagine if Robin and his community were paid international prices for their well-conditioned natural beef at the same time as they are conserving wildlife, our priceless heritage. Then there will be money for Dan and other young people to go to school and even college. Cattle farmers would have an interest in improved disease control and in conserving a healthy environment for their animals. Local communities will be positive about conservation. The better they protect the wildlife, the more income it will generate. All pieces of this imagined future are in place, but one. The conservation areas are underway. The regulated abattoirs are in place. Local communities like Robin's are behind the idea. The international market for beef has never been stronger. But trade regulations are outdated and incompatible with wildlife conservation. Modern science has provided new solutions. Therefore, Robin and communities like his do not need to suffer any longer. They need to be able to conserve our wildlife heritage, but also trade their cattle. Is that too much to ask?